I'm now going to pass the microphone, so to speak, over to Nick Dearden, who is the Director of Global Justice now. He's been campaigning against corporate globalism and for global economic justice for over 20 years. He started his career at atWar onWant, and he was the corporate campaign manager at Amnesty International UK. He was the director of the Jubilee Debt Campaign, now called Debt Justice, where he built strong relationships with campaigners in the Global South, and he's author of Trade Secrets and Pharmanomics. He regularly contributes political analysis to publications including The Guardian, Al Jazeera, Open Democracy, Red Pepper, and Soundings Journal. So I'm very happy to pass over to Nick. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm really honoured to be here. It's great to be speaking alongside Claire, who always spoke up for Palestine when she was in office, and is very old school, but hasn't gone and become a multimillionaire since then, but has only become more committed to the cause. And of course, Jeff and Linda, Jeff, who I met more than 20 years ago now when I was in Palestine. We had this thing of bringing bands. There was a band at the time called Bell and Sebastian. They were very popular, and we brought them to Palestine. And first got to know the work that Jeff was doing, which was just unbelievably inspirational, and the fact that you're still doing it in even more awful circumstances, is phenomenal. I am beyond angry about what's happening. I am numbed this week by some of the images that I've seen coming out of Gaza and the West Bank and Lebanon. But I don't need to explain all of that to you because you're here, and I think we've become so used to being gaslit by our own government about what's going on. It's really lovely to be in a room of people passionate and active on this issue. And it's important because we really, really cannot give up. We really don't have the right to give up or to despair, because as long as we are fighting and protesting and confronting those who are allowing this genocide to take place, there is hope. A little video popped up on my feed on Elon Musk's awful channel a few days ago, and I thought, after all I've seen this week, I can't bear it. And there was maybe you've seen it too. It was a baby being pulled out of some rubble, and I thought, oh God, no. Anyway, the baby was alive, and I was just sitting at my computer, kind of crying that this baby was alive, and just thinking, there is life. As long as there is life, there is hope. As long as we are speaking out, there is hope. As long as we will not be silenced, there is hope. So do not stop, because it is only when there is silence that we have truly lost. I have always worked for international solidarity organisations, and I started out doing all of this at atWar onWant many years ago. But my current organisation, Global Justice Now, we primarily work on global economy issues, debt, unjust trade deals, corporate power, and how the kind of global economic structures create so much impoverishment and dispossession in the world. And these structures were kind of invented from the late 1970s onwards, and they really embed this idea that the market has the answer to all of our problems. And the most important thing in the world is the right of money to go wherever it wants and do whatever it wants on whatever terms it wants. And so we challenge that. And we haven't worked on Palestine until about a year ago, because I know myself how easy it is to get sucked into this issue. To be quite honest, the organisation has thought, well, there's lots of great other organisations doing all of this work, so we've left it to other people. And then a year ago we said, no, we can't. We obviously can't, given what's going on now, not say something about this. And I've been thinking through for our own members and supporters, what's the connection here? And I think, for me, Palestine, what's going on in Palestine, and has been going on for decades now, is a symptom, it's a really extreme symptom of something much deeper in our world that we work on across many different issues. The idea that the lives of the majority of people on the planet really have very little value. They're disposable. They're non-people. And actually, I think you couldn't have the world system that we have. You couldn't have the global economy that we have and the way that it operates unless that idea was perpetrated in the heads of many people. How else could we tolerate it? I mean, we think about the slave trade. We know why the slave trade took place. Lots of people made a lot of money out of it. But how did everybody else tolerate it? And I think part of that was this very strong idea that the enslaved were not quite human. And of course not everyone believed that, and there were wonderful people who dedicated their lives to working in solidarity with those fighting this awful system of brave people on the plantations and so on, until it reached a tipping point. But for me, my organisation, we're about trying to strip away that kind of racist colonialist idea that people are non-people, people are disposable. And I think, if we can't do that on Palestine at the moment, we shouldn't really be doing what we're doing. There is something fundamentally different to when I first visited Palestine 20 years ago. At that time, we were doing everything we could to let people know about the daily humiliations that people were going through, and trying to get as many people over there as possible to experience it, as ICAHD still does, for themselves, because it's that's life-changing. But we were still, we were very much against the tide, even in terms of public opinion, I think, in many Western countries. I don't think we are anymore. I think the vast majority of people in our society agree with us. And that's why I want to bring some hope to you today. I mean, the millions of people who have been protesting over the last year, and some going much, much further, and I want to pay tribute to the activists of Palestine Action, who have been going in and confronting the arms firms that are complicit in this at great personal risk to themselves. I want to pay tribute to the people who for most of this year have been occupying their university campuses, not only here but in the United States, and that's why I think there's a huge change. You couldn't have imagined it 20 years ago, the number of young people in the United States, including at elite universities. And again, I have real hope here. These people are going to be decision makers in 10 years' time or 20 years' time. They're not going to forget this moment. And frankly, if I was a serious thinker on the part of the Israeli government, I would be seriously worried and scared about the reputation of the country, and about what a new generation of people who feel so strongly, so passionately about this are going to do when they're in office. And I think there's some hope there. What we're doing, to bring it back to very practically, because that's kind of what I've been asked to do, is what we see our role as is to play a very small part in building and supporting a resistance, an international solidarity resistance to what's going on, and justifying in broader terms this kind of idea that actually this state is so far beyond the pale that a boycott, divestment and sanctions movement is well overdue. And I think it is possible. We talked about South Africa. I'm going to talk about South Africa some more, because obviously the parallels are not exact, although, Jeff did some great work pioneering this idea that Israel was an apartheid state. We were doing that 20 years ago. But there is a reality to the nature of Israel, I think, like South Africa, that means that kind of an international movement for boycott, sanctions and divestment can work, can apply enough pressure that things change, and to begin isolating it in that way. And we started on the most obvious thing, arms sales. Obviously, we should not be selling arms to a government engaged in this level of war crimes. And that has massive support in this country, across the political spectrum. And we've had some success. It is nowhere near enough success. We've had some success, but the government did not want to do that. I mean, they were forced into that partial arms ban. And they were forced partly by the legal challenges, the wonderful legal challenges being brought by Al-Haq. They genuinely believed that they could be facing criminal prosecution for what they were doing, so that was important. But those legal challenges also wouldn't have happened without the mass support that you and many other people have brought to bear. So I think that is important. Let's also celebrate our victories, even if they are not adequate victories. That is important, and it shows the way. And we've got to go further. We've got to stop the F-35 components, and we've got to stop all arms sales. But then we're beginning to look at where you go beyond that. It is, and the UK government provides us with a perfect opportunity, because almost unbelievably, they have said Israel is one of only 3 countries where they are prioritising a deeper trade deal at the moment. And utterly shocking, right? I mean, talk about rewarding a country for its war crimes. So we're beginning to challenge them. on this. And I think the first thing to note is the trade deal we already have should already have been suspended. It's based on the EU-Israel Association Agreement. It's premised on human rights being respected. You cannot imagine a more flagrant abuse of that agreement. And I'm really pleased that Ireland has got some legal opinion which is going to be presented to the government next week, and it's going to try to unilaterally suspend trade, even within the EU. Spain, I think, may follow suit. So we have some opportunities here. Let's push them on this. Not many people are concentrating on the trade aspect of it. And of course, the government's saying this is all entirely different. This is entirely different. There's no reason we can't hold them to account for their human rights and continue to deepen our trade relationship. But actually, and here's something where I think we can develop our analysis, and there's some great stuff about it in your book, Jeff, and others have written about it too. When we begin to talk about trade, let's ask why the UK wants to trade more with Israel. And we know it's not about, tariff-free oranges or whatever. It is about deepening our economic cooperation with those bits of Israeli industry and the Israeli economy that are absolutely complicit with what's happening in the occupied territories, with what's happening with the genocide in Gaza, because Israel has created an economy, not just security and defense, well, that's important, but AI and tech, all of these sectors that have been war-trained parts of its economy. It is a war economy in many ways. And I actually think there's a good argument that we've got here to people in this country too, because it should scare the hell out of us, out of people in this country, that our government wants to trade these security and defence and technology and AI components, because they're going to test them out on us eventually, right? In some way or another, it is all going to come back on us. They are creating an authoritarian means of population control that all Western governments, looking at the way that our politics is beginning to break down, are at some point going to begin to use. And so I think that's a good argument for saying it is not only that it is right to be involved in this, but it is in our interest as ordinary citizens to be involved in this resistance. So that's the other bit of work we're doing. Look, let me just finish, last 3 minutes, with just some again, a bit of hope. We work on all sorts of conflicts and difficult situations around the world, and most of the time, if we're working on Sudan or DRC, let's be honest, the government's quite happy for us to talk about those things, because they don't believe we're going to be able to build a strong enough movement to actually overcome the terrible situation that people are facing around the world and that challenges British interests. On this issue, they are scared, and they are worried, and they are trying to delegitimize us, and they are calling us all sorts of names, and that's only because they believe this is a genuinely powerful movement that can actually win. I'm not saying we're going to win tomorrow, but I do believe we'll win. And we talked about anti-apartheid. I was just having a look at the history of the anti-apartheid movement. Do you know, the first meeting of the anti-apartheid movement happened just up the road at Conway Hall on the 26th of June 1959. So we think about the anti-apartheid movement as the 80s, when nobody bought the oranges or anything else anymore. It had been going on decades before that. I know, this must end as soon as possible, but at the same time, we've got to accept that social change on this kind of level takes a long time. So do not despair, do not give up. We are closer today for horrible reasons, for reasons that none of us want to be witnessing, but still we are so much closer, I believe, to a genuine change than we were 20 years ago, than we were 30 years ago, than we were 40 years ago. So keep the faith. The darkest hour is the one before the dawn. Keep the faith. Keep doing what you're doing. You are giving me so much inspiration in terms of all the stuff that I've heard about, the initiatives and the projects today. We will win. We will overcome, and justice will prevail.
Thank you, Nick. That was excellent and really useful to have this moment put into its global economic structural context. Really important, I think, and the importance of specific focused action as well.